There are a few things in life you only get one shot at, say making a first impression or seeing Haley's comment, or even donating a kidney. But for juniors in high school, there is one pretty big thing that they only get one shot at, or at least only one shot that counts. And that is the preliminary SAT/National Merit Scholarship qualifying test.
I actually ended up with like a perfect score on the PSAT, which I think I'm really lucky because, that was definitely kind of like a refresh page, see if the number changed,
I didn't have a very good day the day before. I think I had a mental breakdown because I had PSAT on my birthday and I had a art project due and some other test. And so I went into the test room in 11th grade, not very prepared, not feeling my best.
During the test, I just kind of took it without worrying too much about the results, and then after the test is done, I just kind of put it out of my mind, and then when I got the scores, it was okay, yes, good job, Shiva.
I didn't feel like it was my best test.
The test was definitely easier than it had been the previous year, at least for me, so I came out of it feeling very good.
No offense to people who do get National Merit, but I think it's a little overrated, judging on a one-time thing. You might happen to do really well or really bad on it.
If this test only happens one time on one day, why do we place so much emphasis on it? Why is it the sole factor at multiple, albeit mostly state colleges, that qualify students for full ride scholarship? Today, for the inaugural episode of this podcast, we're going to be talking to 5 National Merit semifinalists or commended students.
My name is Katie Rosendale. I'm a senior and I'm a National Merit Scholar.
My name is Caroline Watt and I'm in 12th grade and I got commended on the PSAT.
My name's Thomas Dang. I'm a senior and I am a National Merit Scholar.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Yon. I'm a senior and I'm a National Merit Commended student.
Hi, I'm Shiva. I'm a senior at Plano East and I'm a National Merit semifinalist.
And we're going to be exploring this one test. Later on in the series, we'll discuss other tests and testing issues with teachers and a variety of other people. But today, it's all about the students. I'm Abby Blasingame, and from Pesh Prince, this is Testing Boundaries. Every October, approximately 1.6 million students across the country sit down to take the PSAT. By the next October, only 16,000, or about 1% of these students, will be named a National Merit semifinalist. From those who qualify and apply for the scholarship, 15,000 will become finalists. In East class of 2019, there are 36 semifinalists.
They called all of us into this kind of room, and it was the Building 1 conference room, and they just built it. There were 50 seats there, and there were so many. Plano East had so many National Merit semifinalists that almost all of them were taken.
So yeah, East has a lot of National Merit semifinalists. Part of that can be explained by Plano ISD's well above average performance and preparation, which landed it the number 3 spot on Niche.com's list of cities with the best public schools in America. But more than that, Texas also performs above average in its test scores. The requirements for the title vary by state. This year, the National Merit cutoff was set at 221 in Texas. In North Dakota, West Virginia, and Wyoming, you only had to score a 212, equal to the national index that determines commended students. That means that all 50 of East commended students would qualify as National Merit semifinalists in those states.
Well, each state has a different population, and each population has a slightly different educational background that has different educational opportunities, depending on the school, depending on the district. And taking an average of the states instead of having a national average that may be a little unfair for maybe some of those states that have less funding for their schools.
I think dividing cutoffs by state, first of all, it benefits because each state gets this sort of pool of exemplary scholars they can recognize, right? And it gives each state, in many ways, kind of a fair population, right? Because it's done by the state and the students in that state who have in many ways the same resources to that state's public education, But I also think that, kind of we were saying, it is kind of punitive for the kids in the really competitive states like Texas or California or New York, versus kids in Arizona, or kids in states that statistically and historically like aren't super high achieving, which nothing against them, but I do think it becomes to the point where just the numerical score value can change between states, right? Like a 1490 out of 1520 might not be enough in Texas or California, but that would be near the top in some other states. So in many ways, I don't think it's fair, but there are like alternatives to fix it, like a national sort of way. But then again, like it doesn't give sort of the states that are under resourced in the terms of education that recognition.
No matter what the cutoff, the fact remains that the people who qualify for these distinctions are an elite group of students. But what got them there? For some, it was an intense, unyielding drive.
So in my junior year, I was in 5 AP classes. One of them was a double block, it was biology. And then I was in honors pre-cal. I took 2 math classes last year, which were AP statistics and honors pre-cal. And I would get off at 4:15. I would go home, eat dinner, maybe talk for a little while till like 5. And then I would stay up the rest of the night doing homework till whenever I went to sleep, 5 till whenever. And it just depended on how many tests I had. Like, I never did anything. And then I would go out maybe Saturday afternoon, maybe Friday night. But usually every day Sunday I stayed home just studying for like 10 straight hours. Like I actually just studied all the time.
For others, maybe their family background instilled them with an appreciation for education since the beginning.
Well, my parents are both very smart. My dad's actually a professor at SMU, so he's very intelligent. My mom has her master's. She's very smart. So like, I wouldn't say there was a huge emphasis on like grades ever, like when I was being raised, but they always wanted me to do my best. They wanted me to like focus on genuinely learning and improving, like intellectually. So it was very nice because I never felt pressured by them to get like a specific grade or get a specific thing. They just kind of let me do what I wanted to do, and it ended up working out, I think. But I had like a U.S. president placemat that I would look at every single day at dinner, like with just small things like that. And they definitely invested a lot of time into like teaching me how to read or count or do whatever.
Maybe others just have an innate love of learning.
And at least this is for me, though. When I was kind of doing those sort of practice problems, I wasn't thinking of like PSAT or national merit. I was just trying to like get like a good enough score that I would be proud of, and that's kind of it, right? So I think it totally varies per person. Definitely that sort of motivation. Like I have friends who are like dead set on perfect scores or like really want national merit, But I think for me, it was just sort of being able to like make something that I was proud of. I've never sort of been that sort of person that like cares about that too much, or like says, oh, like I'm in the top 11%, I need to be in the top 7%, like I know I'm up there because I work hard, but I also think that getting bogged down in that sort of stuff is really dangerous, and it also kind of sucks the fun out of learning in school.
I like doing well. I like trying hard, I guess. Like learning just in general is very exciting and interesting to me, which I know sounds so lame, but it is.
I think as a society, we probably place too much emphasis on test scores and raw numbers rather than, the true underlying intent of education is to become a smarter individual who is well prepared to affect, the society in a positive way.
And what about the culture that surrounds students day in and day out? Doesn't that have some effect?
We have a lot of high achievers in the IB school, which I'm a part of, and people who like complain about getting over a 1500. Not to like call anyone out, but I hear this a lot, and they're like, "Oh, I can't believe I got like a 1550," and I'm like, "I was aiming for 1500, but okay," and then I just don't say anything. I'm like, like when you have someone to compare to, it's really easy to think you're not good enough, think that you have to do better. But learning how to accept like what you do, what happens, like I think that's pretty important. Our habits of like caring about our academics and our standardized test scores just like what we've grown up with in the IB community and placing a high emphasis on scores in general. I think that really pushed me.
And I mean, there's kind of a similar culture in AP, like where I am now, but IB focuses a lot on like best possible test scores, and it's kind of exhausting sometimes, like when the focus is on getting the best scores instead of like learning or doing your best.
I am not an IB. I would never. I will never. Yeah, there are definitely some sort of like. I know a lot of people in IB, and there is a difference in sort of the values that are emphasized and the priorities that are emphasized. You've probably noticed, right? But I think it kind of does make a difference because it is an environment you're in. So I'm thankful for what I've gotten and sort of like the opportunities I've gotten.
A really good thing about schools and just like like even universities and like these kind of cultures that are centered around learning is that you get to learn from the people around you, and people motivate each other to do better and to kind of have that drive to constantly learn more. And so being in that kind of environment is really crucial to becoming a person who's very curious and always interested in learning more.
These are high achieving students, but are there those that the test fails to recognize?
This is what someone told me a long time ago, that the SAT and the PSAT test how well you take the PSAT and the SAT. That I have so many friends who are like super smart, like they're legitimate geniuses, and they just don't test well.
Some of the most intelligent people I know don't have test scores that are that great, but they're still, obviously very intelligent.
And vice versa, I have friends who like struggle, with like general sort of school stuff, but they test really well and they work well under pressure.
I mean, I feel like test scores can be a measure of someone's intelligence. Like, for me personally, I feel like I test well, so I feel like my test scores are hopefully a reflection of my intelligence.
It just makes the process a lot easier to kind of estimate who has potential, who has like a chance at being successful in the future, and recognizing what they can do. It's not the most accurate, but it gives a general idea.
The test scores, like there's such a high pressure to do well, and like I'm expected to do well. Like before I took my SAT, everyone's like, Caroline, like you're so smart, you're gonna get a 1600. You don't know what you're talking about. Like I work so hard for all my grades. Like they don't see like what goes into that, and they don't see like what goes into my SAT preparation. But like it's kind of hard when everyone expects you to do good, and you're trying to live up to that challenge, but like you can't really.
In general, standardized testing I don't think is like a really good. It's not a perfect picture of who you are as a student, because that relies on a lot more characteristics like creativity and personality, and I think all those things come into play to show who you really are as a student more than just a score. I don't think a test like that is a good picture of anybody. Like it's just a very specific part of you, so it doesn't really accurately show you as a person or as a student.
There is one thing that the test seems pretty good at determining. Because it tests both language and math, National Merit semifinalists seem to be very well-rounded.
I want to major in biochemistry and cell biology, and then I want to either minor or double major in art history because that's kind of like my second passion. I definitely want to become a physician of some sort. Like I'm really interested in oncology and cancer, but I was talking to my parents, and like they think becoming a doctor is like a waste of time and money, because they're both engineers and they got done, after 4 years of college, right? But I mean, I really, really like science, but I also really like people, so I think I didn't want to be stuck in a lab for the rest of my life. So I think becoming a physician of some sort, like I think that's really my goal, and like I've always wanted that.
I'm in the chamber orchestra. I do history fair and science fair, and I'm also the president of the National Honor Society. For undergrad, I'm hoping to major in neuroscience and then, in the future go to med school and become a doctor. As a doctor, you're not just like treating patients or like looking at the science behind it. You have to know how to write reports, and you have to know how you can communicate to patients in a proper way, what they're facing and what steps they should take to, move on. And if you're an engineer, you also need to know how to write reports, and those those language skills are really what take you to the next level in any career.
I'm involved in choir. I love choir. I do all region. I sing in the choir. I take lessons. And I'm also in French club, and there's this statewide French competition every year called the Texas French Symposium, and I compete in that every year. I do a vocal group there, and I read prose, I do sight reading, I do poetry, and it's super interesting and super fun. And I'm also involved in it's like a nonprofit that's local called City House. I'm on the youth advisory board of City House. I'm the secretary. I actually really like math and science. I mean, it's not my favorite, but no, I like basically everything. Like, that's the problem with me. I can't pick anything because I like it all.
Tests like the PSAT are a tangible way of measuring students' abilities, but it's important to remember that there are many intangible aspects of learning.
I always try to keep my mind on the bigger perspective. These test scores are only relevant for a certain period in our lives, and after that we move on. No one thinks about the PSAT once they're in college. It's a thing of the past. So I try to keep my mind focused on the big picture about learning and how we learn so that we can improve ourselves as people and then use our learning to help those around us. So I try to keep myself focused on the big picture.
Thanks for listening to the first episode of Testing Boundaries. Look out for new episodes on peshprince.com and follow @peshprince on Twitter for the latest updates on school, local, and world news.